Steve, welcome to Legal Practice Intelligence. Good to see
Yeah,
you again.
yeah, you too. Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, Steve, do you want to introduce yourself to the audience again?
Yeah, so Steve Tyndall, I'm the CEO and founder at ClientSense. My background's been in heading up IT for law firms, and beyond that, doing consulting into law firms, helping them choose technology, integrate the systems together, and really get the most out of their technology stack. So that's been my background, and really the consulting is where ClientSense came from, identifying a need and developing that, and now having that as a solution available to firms.
Brilliant. Steve, today, I'm sorry to do this to you. I'm going to put you on the spot. I want you to tell our subscribers, what do the best firms do around client management?
The best firms. Well, for one, they don't assume that a client will return to them just because they've used them in the past. So I think what they do is there's an old adage which says, how does a client break up with their law firm? Well, they just stop emailing them. So you don't have to break up with your law firm. You just don't contact them anymore. And I think firms assume that a client that's not engaging with you or is not sending you any work at the moment must have no legal work. Well, that's not necessarily true. So I think really one of the most important things is to actively stay in touch, as simple as that sounds, and make sure that you are engaged with these clients even when there are no active matters. So I think that is important because, as I said, otherwise you really have no way of knowing whether that client as such is using you or has stopped using you.
Mm-hmm. And I guess from point of view of what are the best kinds of people in law firm to do client management? I mean, what kinds of personalities, what kinds of people have you seen work really well?
Yeah, look, I think they're people that are very they're solution focused. So they're somebody that has a desire to want to help people, is really looking to engage and understand. So in my mind, it's someone that is about trying to understand the problem that the client has and is interested in solving it. And I think that's as core as again, as simple as that might sound, I think that's actually the key ingredient to someone that can look after a relationship and grow a relationship, because ultimately they're there to be an advisor, to form a trusted relationship, and you can really only do that by having the client's best interest at heart. So I think that's really what we talk about when I talk about a good client manager. That's what I think of.
So at what point should the partner hand off the relationship to a client manager, or they don't hand it off? I mean, what happens there?
Yeah, I think there's a bit of a blend. I do think that partners do need to stay in touch. I think it's important that if I'm the client, I want to hear from the partner. I don't want to feel like I've been delegated, or relegated down. But ultimately, what I think, though, is there is an opportunity to bring someone at maybe a mid-level, an associate or so, into the relationship, someone that can be much more proactive with their time, someone that maybe can, provide more focus and really dig in and understand that client. So I think it does have a partner, maybe overseeing, if that's the way to think about it. But I do believe that bringing someone in that can, enthusiastically engage with the client and look to grow that relationship, rather than, seeing it as an extra job that doesn't really fit with time constraints.
So I'm going to actually ask you a really controversial question now. Yeah. Do you think that that law firms should actually do sales forecasting based on, if you looked at from retention of clients and what matters are likely to hit the pipeline? So do you think they should do sales forecasting the same as everyone else does?
I don't, in that I don't think it's about so much forecasting, and the reason I say this is typically you can't make me have a legal matter just because you followed me up 12 times in the last 3 weeks. So I tend to think that, for a lot of clients, there's firms they use even if they're not using them all the time. So I tend to think you're trying to win the client, not the matter. So therefore, forecasting the matters is probably not as relevant as maybe winning the client and then looking to grow cross-service, increase wallet share, all of those good things. But I don't think it's as transactional as necessarily saying, we will have work in this area in the next 3 months, and if I keep doing this, we'll get this other area. I think that that's considering it all very transactional, whereas the biggest pieces of work are not often something that could be put into a pipeline and measured in that way. I think often the best pieces of work come from a relationship which is fundamentally built on trust and open and often engagement. So a very tight relationship. Everything follows from there, but I'm not sure that it's necessarily about measuring or inputting our expectations around forecasting. I think I would put my effort into managing the relationship more than measuring it.
How would you say that a client success function is actually successful in a quantitative way in a firm?
I think it's important to look at, when I say net promoter, but essentially look at, would this client use us again if the need appeared? So measuring just open matters might not be the only way or best way to measure the success of, call it, the client manager. I think ultimately the client manager is ensuring that if and when that need appears, you will turn to us. You will come to me, you'll talk to us. And so I would be, it's a little bit tricky to measure, but I'd be measuring things like, how often do we get an opportunity that wasn't necessarily put out to tender? That's a really good sign of a great relationship. I'd be looking at, if it is a survey, I know a lot of lawyers shy away from feedback and surveys and so on, but they're a really good opportunity for a client to provide their input. So I think they're important measures. But fundamentally, what I like most about any of these surveys or client feedback initiatives is that you're asking, the fact that you're stopping and asking, what do we do well? What do we not do well? What could we be doing for you? I think is actually the key to what that all stands for. So regardless of the response, I think the fact that you're asking and the fact that you care too is half the battle. So for me, I'd be looking at, I know it's difficult to measure, but would this client come back to us, or are they going to others? Are we in a competitive situation, or do we have the first opportunity?
How do they get remunerated? I mean, in terms of a bonus based on what?
Yeah, look, I think that's going to come down to, a whole lot of different measures and all the rest. I think obviously with things like this, you need to be very careful that the thing you're measuring doesn't become the game. So you don't end up focusing on the bonus, you actually keep focused on the client. So one of the things that I would look at is, I'd be making sure that I'm peppering the expectation with a little bit of, here's what we'd hope to get if we can continue to keep this client happy. And here's one that I'm giving you that maybe we don't expect to get so much from. And if you could turn this one around, that would be impressive. So I think what I'd be looking for is to put some less of a calculated measure, more of an objective. So if I was sitting with, someone in my team saying, well, what are the things you're expecting to do this year? And what are, not all of them will pay off, but what are the things that you think you can be doing, and making sure that those efforts are made, even if not all have turned into, the next big piece of work.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Steve, it's always a pleasure to chat. Thank you for your time today. And you've got a report coming out very soon, which is around client retention and employee retention.
Absolutely, yeah. So looking forward to making that available, and should have a number of good insights that we've gained from working with a range of different firms.
Brilliant. Thanks again for your time, Steve.
All right. Thanks very much, Dave.